The Week 3 edition of This Week in CA Football is ready to go. I'm Bobby Broyles along with Rob Washburn. Before we start breaking down the storylines going into Week 3, there's a lot to talk about and plenty of headlines to recap in Week 2.
Yeah, we have to start in Kingston, Rhode Island, where Delaware and Rhode Island put on a show in front of a raucous overflow crowd of more than 8,500 under the lights at Meade Stadium. The Blue Hens overcame a 13-0 halftime deficit to take a third-quarter lead, but the Rams sent the game to overtime on a career-long 44-yard field goal by C.J. Carrick. Both teams traded touchdowns in the first two overtime periods before Delaware moved back on top on Pat Kehoe's fifth TD pass of the night and then sealed the 44-36 win on Justice Henley's interception in the end zone. It was an amazing start to what we both expect will be a very competitive year across CA football. Now, the CA went 5-1 against FCS non-conference foes last Saturday to improve to 12-2 on the season. Towson and Villanova joined Delaware with 2-0 starts, and the league was rewarded with 6 teams ranked in this week's Stats Top 25 poll, which is the most of any conference. Congratulations also go out to Elon senior defensive end Marcus Willoughby, who was recognized as the Stats FCS National Defensive Player of the Week after recording a career-high 14 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack as the Phoenix defeated the Citadel.
With all that being said, Week 2 is now history as we take a look at this Saturday's matchups, and there are some good ones. Rob, let's begin at 1 o'clock on FlowFootball.com and on NBC Sports Washington and Philadelphia. It will be the 7-time national champions North Dakota State Bison, and we know them pretty well, making the trip to Newark to take on Delaware. A great opportunity for the Blue Hens, Rob, to take on the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, anytime you get a chance to test yourself against the best FCS program in the nation on your home field, it's a tremendous opportunity. North Dakota State has won 7 of the past 8 national championships and doesn't appear to have skipped a beat this season, despite graduating a large group of seniors. Now, for a Delaware team that's off to a 2-0 start and continues to progress in year 3 under Coach Danny Rocco, it's a chance to erase the memories of last year's trip to the Fargo Dome, where the Blue Hens surrendered 28 quick points in the first quarter. Delaware is riding the momentum from last week's win at Rhode Island, where quarterback Pat Kehoe shook off 3 first-half interceptions and threw for 282 yards and a career-high 5 touchdowns. The Blue Hens also established the run behind Andre Robinson, who picked up 111 yards in a TD on 20 carries. UD's defense kept the team in the game in the first half last week by twice forcing field goals when Rhode Island drove inside the 10-yard line. They will need to be strong again this week against a talented redshirt freshman quarterback in Trey Lance, who's averaging 279 yards of total offense and has contributed 6 touchdowns through the air and 4 on the ground. All-American linebacker Jabril Cox leads a Bison defense that is giving up just 8.5 points per game.
Also headlining Saturday's contest are a pair of conference matchups in Orono. It will be 2 teams that are ranked in the top 10 matching up as Maine welcomes Towson at 7 o'clock on FlowFootball.com.
What a huge early season matchup between 2 teams that not only have CA title aspirations but have their sights set on deep runs in the FCS playoffs. Towson is off to a 2-0 start and cruised past North Carolina Central 42-3 last Saturday. The Tigers' high-powered offense has been very efficient, with quarterback Tom Flacco throwing for 556 yards and 4 touchdowns with no interceptions, and running back Shane Simpson picking up 163 yards and 2 scores on the ground. Now, Towson's defense has been much improved, giving up only 318 yards and a league-low 12 points per game while forcing 5 turnovers this season. They will face a Maine offense that is averaging a league-best 470 yards per game and ranks 4th in FCS through the air. Quarterback Chris Ferguson has passed for 709 yards and 4 touchdowns in the first 2 games, with Black Bears receivers Jaquan Blair, Devin Young, and Ernest Edwards all averaging better than 18 yards per catch. Now, that Black Hole defense has been very solid, limiting opponents to only 20 points and 332 yards per contest. A year ago, if we remember at Towson, Maine broke a 28-28 tie with a touchdown with 6:29 to go, and then stopped the Tigers on a 4th and goal play from the 4-yard line with just over a minute remaining. I would expect another down-to-the-wire game on Saturday.
At 6 o'clock on FlowFootball.com and on NBC Sports Washington Plus, it will be Elon hitting the road to take on Richmond.
The last 2 matchups between these teams have featured very high-scoring affairs, with Elon winning 36-33 in 2017 and 38-28 in 2018 in contests that were one-score games in the fourth quarter. Now, the Phoenix offense looked strong in last week's 35-28 victory over the Citadel, as quarterback Davis Cheek threw for 226 yards, and running backs Jalen Thomas and Breland Cyphers combined for 215 yards and 3 TDs on the ground. It was an equally impressive effort for the Elon defense, which held the Citadel to 225 total yards. However, they will face a stern test from a Richmond offense that is averaging a league-high 267 yards per game on the ground and 420 yards overall. Dual-threat quarterback Joe Mancuso has contributed a team-high 147 yards and 2 TDs on the ground and 255 yards in a score through the air. He's made a quick connection with transfer wide receivers Charlie Fessler and Keaston Fuller, who have combined for 20 receptions in the first 2 games. Now, that Spiders defense struggled last week in a loss at ACC foe Boston College, but was dominant in that Week 1 victory over Jacksonville. They will need to return to top form for the Spiders to have success on Saturday.
At 1 o'clock on ESPN Plus, UAlbany takes the trip to Jersey to take on Monmouth.
Yeah, UAlbany was clicking on all cylinders last Saturday as it cruised past Bryant 45-3 in its home opener. The Great Danes piled up 362 yards on the ground, with Coastal Carolina transfer Alex James running for 229 yards and a TD on just 12 carries, and Carl Mofor adding 123 yards on 16 attempts. With all the success on the ground, quarterback Jeff Undercuffler didn't need to take a lot of shots downfield, but was still able to throw a pair of scoring passes. Defensively, the Great Danes pitched a shutout through 3 quarters and forced 3 turnovers, including a pick 6 by Jaron Williams. Now, Monmouth evened its record at 1-1 by beating Lafayette 24-21 last Saturday. The Hawks were picked to finish second in the Big South this season and featured the league's preseason Offensive Player of the Year in quarterback Kenji Behar and a top-notch running back in Pete Guerrero, who ran for 152 yards last week. Defensively, Monmouth held Lafayette to negative 12 yards rushing, so it will be a good test for the UAlbany ground game.
At 4 o'clock, JMU will be at home again this weekend as they play host to Morgan State on NBC Sports Washington and FlowFootball.com.
Yeah, JMU took care of business in its home opener, rolling over St. Francis 44-7 last Saturday. The Dukes piled up 533 yards of offense with better than 200 on the ground and through the air. Quarterback Ben DiNucci accounted for 272 yards of total offense and 2 touchdowns, and freshman running back Solomon Van Horst ran for 86 yards and 2 scores in the first half alone. The Dukes' defense was unbelievable, holding the Red Flash to 69 total yards through the first 3 quarters and recording 10 consecutive 3-and-outs, which is an amazing stat. Morgan State hasn't played since a 46-3 loss at Bowling Green back on August the 29th. The Bears managed just 4 first downs in that game and gave up 620 yards defensively.
Stony Brook returns home this Saturday to take on Wagner on SNY and FlowFootball.com.
Yeah, there wasn't much good for Stony Brook to take away from that 62-7 loss at Utah State last Saturday, as the Aggies and future NFL draft pick Jordan Love had over 700 yards of offense. Now, Seawolves starting quarterback Tykel Fields was limited due to a knee injury, so Jack Cassidy was able to get significant playing time and did engineer a nice 14-play, 75-yard scoring drive in the third quarter. Redshirt freshman defensive back Justin Burns was the bright spot on defense with 7 tackles and a fumble recovery. Now, it would be important for Stony Brook to leave that game behind and regain the momentum on both sides of the ball from the Week 1 victory over Bryant. Wagner nearly knocked off UConn in Week 1, but fell to 0-2 following a loss to East Stroudsburg last week. Running back Dimitri McKenzie has rushed for 202 yards and 3 touchdowns this far. This is the first of 2 straight games against New York foes for Stony Brook, so a lot of bragging rights on the line.
Yep. Also at 6 o'clock, Villanova looks to continue their hot start as Wildcats travel to Bucknell.
Yeah, Villanova is now 2-0 after overcoming a slow start to defeat Lehigh 38-10 in its home opener. The Wildcats were once again very balanced offensively, with Daniel Smith throwing 3 touchdown passes for the second straight game, and running backs Justin Covington and Jalen Jackson combining for better than 200 yards on the ground. Just as impressively, Villanova has yet to turn the ball over this season. Villanova's defense limited Lehigh to just 89 yards rushing, and the Wildcats recorded a pick 6 for the second straight game as Elijah Trent returned an interception 37 yards for a score in the second quarter. Now, Bucknell dropped to 0-2 after a 30-10 loss to Sacred Heart last week, but will be playing at home for the first time on Saturday. The Bison have utilized 3 quarterbacks in each of the first 2 games and are giving up 600 yards per game defensively.
William & Mary returns to Zabel Stadium to take on Colgate at 6 o'clock on FlowFootball.com and your view on Cox Communications.
Yeah, after a 52-17 loss at ACC foe Virginia last Friday, William & Mary will be glad to be back at home, where it played well in a Week 1 win over Lafayette. Dynamic freshman quarterback Hollis Mathis was unable to get much going against the Cavaliers, but should benefit from the experience and continue to bounce back this week. One bright spot offensively was the running of Albert Funderburk, who picked up 50 yards and a touchdown on just 5 carries. Now, the Tribe defense intercepted 3 passes, highlighted by a 47-yard pick six by Armand Jones in the third quarter. Through 2 games this season, William & Mary has already forced 8 turnovers. Defending Patriot League champion Colgate is off to an 0-2 start, which included a season-opening setback to Villanova. The Raiders are led offensively by quarterback Grant Brenneman, the preseason player of the year in the Patriot League. Colgate's defense is allowing 41 points per game so far, but held the Tribe to 71 yards rushing in a 23-0 shutout at Zabel Stadium a year ago.
And wrap up at 7 o'clock on ESPN Plus with the only FBS matchup this Saturday as New Hampshire travels to Florida to take on FIU out of Conference USA.
Yeah, New Hampshire will need to bounce back from a heartbreaking 13-10 loss at Holy Cross last week, in which the Crusaders recovered a fumble in the end zone with 1:56 to go. Freshman quarterbacks Brett Edwards and Max Brosmer each played a half in their collegiate debuts, with Brosmer throwing for 106 yards over the final 30 minutes. Carlos Washington had a nice day on the ground, running for 107 yards, including a 19-yard TD gallop that gave UNH the lead with just 6:52 to play. The Wildcats' defense was excellent, giving up just 2 field goals all afternoon and holding Holy Cross to 62 yards rushing. Cameron Brusco had 7 tackles, including 3 for loss in the game. Now, FIU fell to 0-2 after a 20-14 setback to Western Kentucky last week. The Panthers' offense is averaging just 254 yards per game, while their defense is allowing 447.
As always, folks, casports.com/live scores is your source for live scoring and in-game live stats throughout the third week of the college football season.
And of course, you can continue to follow the league on our many social media platforms such as facebook.com/CA Football and Twitter @CA Football using the hashtag CAFB.
Our on-campus series begins this weekend as the CA football crew will be in Orono, Maine for the big contest between the Tigers and the Black Bears. Make sure to follow CA Football's social media platforms this weekend for the latest. And next Thursday will be the season debut of CA Football's Going Deep feature series on cafootball.com. That is it from us today. Enjoy the games, everyone.